NBC's Ken Delanian, and he broke the story, I should mention, with two of our NBC colleagues. Now, Ken, it is big to identify anyone as a subject of the probe. Why is Mike Flynn Jr. under this scrutiny, and how did you get 4 sources to confirm it?
Well, Ari, as you mentioned, we have a dogged team working this story for days, and we found the right people who were familiar with this matter, and they confirmed it for us. And we don't know exactly the conduct that the special counsel is examining with Mike Flynn Jr., but we know that he was the right-hand man of his father, who is apparently facing some criminal jeopardy over his failure to declare, his lobbying work for Turkey and for some other financial entanglements and international business relationships. And the son would have known about almost every meeting. As you mentioned, he attended that gala in Moscow where Mike Flynn, the father, sat next to Vladimir Putin. The son was along for that. So he would have intimate knowledge about his father's business dealings. And moreover, taking a step back, when you look at Mueller's strategy here, if it's his intention to have leverage over Mike Flynn, to get him to talk about what he knows about potential collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, having his son on the hook with some criminal jeopardy, potential criminal jeopardy, is certainly a point of leverage.
And that goes to another question, and as a lawyer, I wouldn't want to have to answer it, but you're here, so I'm going to try to get you to answer it. What portion of this is about the son, and what portion is really about the father?
Well, I got to believe a lot of it is about the father. I mean, the son is collateral damage, really. To the extent that the son was... I mean, for example, one of the issues with Mike Flynn, the father, is he apparently, allegedly, failed to disclose foreign contacts and certain business arrangements on his security clearance application. That's an allegation that House Democrats, renewed again today, and it's been made in the past. To what extent did Mike Flynn, the son, know about these arrangements, know about the failure to disclose? Was there a conspiracy of any kind? These are the kind of questions that are going to be asked. If he had knowledge of or participated in illegal acts by the father, he may be on the hook for that. But really, it's about the father's conduct.
Right. Stay with me. I want to bring in a former federal prosecutor, Joyce Vance, as well as Daily Mail White House correspondent Francesca Chambers. Joyce, walk us through what it means to be a subject.
So a subject of an investigation is someone whose conduct potentially falls within the range of what's under investigation. You'll remember, Ari, that federal prosecutors use 3 definitions. A witness is just what it sounds like. Subject is someone who's within the crosshairs, but prosecutors haven't determined that they are a target. And then a target is someone who prosecutors believe they have sufficient evidence to charge, or that they will have that evidence.
Right, and so it's not good for him. The point that Ken and I were just discussing, this relates all back to the father. It creates potential investigative and prosecutorial leverage. But Bob Mueller is going to follow the facts. I don't think they're going to have him in these crosshairs if there isn't actual facts and conduct to support it. So, Francesca, looking at the pushback here from Team Trump, I want to play the old pushback, which was, well, Flynn Jr. is not that involved in things, and some new pushback. Here was the old pushback.
General Flynn's son has no involvement in the transition whatsoever.
He has a transition email.
Well, he has no involvement in the transition whatsoever.
You see the talking points there smack right into the facts, email being something we've all heard about through the course of 2016, that I would call some involvement, Francesca. And then here, just breaking in our hour, Mike Flynn back on Twitter, Mike Flynn Jr., which has been very controversial because he has pushed a lot of falsehoods and conspiracies there, but he says, quote, fake news media, we're done covering the pesky hurricanes, right, 4 question marks, and then says back to Russia. And then he calls this through a hashtag, a nothing burger. Francesca, what are we hearing from Trump world?
Well, there is no doubt that the White House is distancing themselves from this widening Russia probe. Today, White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said that she had not discussed this with the president specifically and referred reporters to outside counsel on this matter. But as you noted, Mike Flynn Jr. had an email during the transition, and the vice president tried to say that he had no involvement. But why did he have an email during the transition process if that was the case? And so certainly there are still questions that the White House has to answer about Mike Flynn Jr.'s involvement during the Trump campaign. And that's certainly something that prosecutors will be looking at, the special counsel will be looking at as well.
The other piece to this, the other Flynn development today was from Capitol Hill. I want to get all of you on it. Democrats say they have the evidence that Flynn Sr. hid these Russia-related trips, part of his work on a plan to build nuclear reactors in the Middle East. Democrats saying Flynn's secrets may have actually broken the law, handing over evidence to Mueller's team. And it's not just Democrats. Flynn admitting on his third financial disclosure form that he says he did get paid over $5,000 for that project, and the company behind the nuclear plan says they cut him a check for $25,000. The report paints a picture of a secretive national security official basically on the take. And Ken, I think this is going to interest Mueller because it raises legal questions that extend, again, beyond 2016, beyond November, and into these two men, father and son, the way they worked with the government.
Absolutely, Ari. I mean, what we know now from Mike Flynn's disclosure statements is that he was paid around $1.8 million by various entities. And this is one deal that we're now learning about where, it was a scheme apparently to build nuclear power plants in the Middle East with some Russian involvement. But the larger picture is here was Mike Flynn making all this money from all these private entities up to and including through the transition. Then he becomes National Security Advisor. You got to believe that Mueller is asking the question, did any of this money influence his behavior in the government? For example, he was paid more than $500,000 by the government of Turkey. Did he take any action to benefit the Turkish government? Those are active questions you got to believe being investigated by the special counsel.
And Joyce, as a prosecutor, we talk a lot about intent and motive. It's fascinating to see someone operating at such a high level taking these relatively small deals by the scale of what multi-star generals can get. I mean, you don't need to sell access to the government to get $25,000. We all know from the public reporting a general could do a couple speeches or do other kinds of work. Does that help or hurt him, the idea that this may have been motivated by money?
So I think that hurts him. Prosecutors like to think about investigations sort of like a duck swimming across the surface of a pond. What you see publicly is that smooth, easy moving body, while underneath the surface of the water, the feet are paddling wildly. I would guess that Mueller's folks are viewing these $25,000 transactions as that smooth part of the body and that there's a lot more beneath the surface here.
And Francesca, is this another day where the White House feels they've been pulled back into Russia, or have they sort of made peace with that because we've seen the strategy sometimes being, well, leave it alone, we're doing other work, and other days them picking fights with Jim Comey as they did on Monday?
Well, a major discussion at the White House today has been the president's tax reform package, which we are yet to see yet, but his team has been working aggressively with legislators on that. Of course, as you mentioned, James Comey has come up several times this week with the White House saying the president was 100% right to fire him. When it comes to Michael Flynn, you'll have to recall he has not worked at the White House, Michael Flynn the elder, since February when he was let go by the president. But that wasn't for failing to disclose this business that he had with these foreign governments to the government. That was because he reportedly lied to the vice president about whether or not he discussed sanctions with the Russian government, which is also something that's being looked at. So you have to keep that in mind as you consider the Michael Flynn and the White House's involvement here. The White House has blamed the Obama administration for not vetting Michael Flynn better, even though it clearly didn't vet him too well during the transition.
Which, Ken, in a sea of bizarre talking points, I think that might be the most bizarre because it was leaked out at the time, before Flynn was ever reprimanded or fired, that Barack Obama personally tried to warn President Trump, basically saying this is not someone you want to have in this high a post.
Of course he did. And by the time Mike Flynn was appointed National Security Advisor, everyone knew the story of what had happened at the Defense Intelligence Agency and how James Clapper had essentially pushed Flynn out early over basically an issue of management chaos. And so the idea that, first of all, it's also extraordinary that a man, became the National Security Advisor after essentially, earning more than $1 million in part from foreign governments or lobbying on behalf of foreign governments. We haven't seen that kind of thing before, and it really raises a lot of questions about what vetting there was.
And so, Joyce, finally to you on the subjects we have here. Paul Manafort, Michael Flynn Sr., and Michael Flynn Jr. are these confirmed subjects, according to NBC reporting. And then the people under some sort of scrutiny, President Trump, of course, for the discussion around whether there was obstruction or interference, as well as any role he might have played in the investigation here into his campaign, Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Carter Page. So all told, that's 7+. What are we to make of that in terms of your understanding of how Mueller is looking at these different people?
Mueller is looking from the outside in. So we're starting to see him talk with people who worked in the White House with this group of people who are under investigation. He will be thoroughly and carefully examining exactly what happened. I think Ken is exactly right that a lot of this circles around Flynn's conduct. Of course, Acting Attorney General Sally Yates took the remarkable step of coming to the White House to warn the White House counsel about potential problems involving Flynn. We've seen increased attacks from the White House on Jim Comey, which seems to signal that something's coming from the direction of Jim Comey. And we've learned today that there are 2 senior FBI officials who Mueller is trying to keep from testifying on the Hill, which seems to be an indication that he wants to protect their testimony from public view, that there's something important there. So all told, it looks like he's starting to focus on this smaller group, but at the same time being very careful to get all of the details on board and to thoroughly test the evidence before he makes any final decisions.
Understood, and very interesting. Ken Delaney, and thanks for sharing your scoop with us. Francesca and Joyce, thank you for being here. Up next, we have a report on another focus of the